This is the Fairly Current Show. I am Umapagan Ampikaipakan, and today we have with us the morally courageous author, journalist, advocate of Islamic reform, and my personal favorite, winner of Oprah Winfrey's Chutzpah Award.
You're a brown guy and you know how to pronounce chutzpah?
Thank you very much.
Well, that's all I need to hear.
So, Irshad Manji, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Welcome to Kuala Lumpur.
And welcome to hosting your first Fairly Convention.
You had to bring that up.
Well, only because I need people to understand, why the chemistry is what it is with us tonight. Whatever that is.
Whatever that may be.
Yeah.
So, one thing I always am curious about is, at which point did you realize that you were a deeply religious person? Was it a function of upbringing, or was there a switch that went off at some point?
No, I don't think it was either. I think, I grew up in Vancouver, Canada, attending two types of schools. The public school of most North American kids, secular public school, and then every Saturday for several hours at a stretch, the Islamic religious school, the madrasa.
Oh.
And that is where I did what I do at public school. I asked seemingly simple but apparently inconvenient questions.
They didn't like that.
They didn't like that, and I was booted out of the madrasa at the age of 14. But I could have at that point, of course, left Islam and said, to hell with religion. I didn't, because I felt it would not be fair to my faith if I took what I was being given from the teacher as the gospel truth, if I can put it that way, about what Islam is. So, as I had to explain to my thoroughly mortified mom, just because I've left the madrasa does not mean I'm leaving Allah. And I studied Islam on my own for the next 20 years and came to realize how beautiful many aspects of the faith are, including the fact that Islam once had a tradition of critical thinking and creative reasoning known as ijtihad. And so that discovery, which sadly I would have not been able to have at the madrasa, that discovery really formed, the basis of my work on Muslim reform and moral courage.
So this idea of, questioning one's faith, a lot of people are under the impression that I think concepts of freedom of speech and free speech run in contrary with organized religion.
Right.
Or Islam.
Right.
And how does that work? Because obviously, if you derive everything from the Word of God and from the Quran or from the Hadith, what happens with regards to freedom? Because everything it's supposed to be the gospel truth.
Okay, well, let's take that premise and work with it. Let's say everything in the Quran is the gospel truth. In that case, what literalists would have to appreciate then is that the Quran itself contains 3 times as many verses calling on Muslims to think and rethink and analyze and reflect, instead of verses that tell us only what is right or only what is wrong. In other words, triple the number of passages encouraging ijtihad instead of blind submission. So by the literalist standard alone,
free
thinking not only is allowed, is a responsibility.
So what happened? This idea of people just getting called out for questioning the faith.
Yeah.
Is it because we rely on the, anointed interpreters of this faith, the imams?
Yeah. I think that Muslims today make the fatal mistake, really, of confusing God with God's self-appointed ambassadors. And, the critical point to appreciate here is that God is one. That is the central tenet of Islam, okay? Which means that those who anoint themselves, muftis and imams, sure, they can speak for themselves, but they cannot speak on behalf of God. Nobody can legitimately behave as if he or she has the full truth of anything, which further means that actually it becomes a spiritual duty for Muslims to contribute to societies in which we can disagree with one another in peace and with civility, because anything less means that we're playing God with one another. So here's the delicious paradox. Believing in one God obliges us to defend human liberty.
She blew my mind. But no, then why doesn't that happen enough? So, for example, I guess when when bad things happen, and if those bad things are somehow done in the name of faith or in the name of Islam, you have, there's no doubt you have your fair share of, I guess, moderates and liberals and who denounce it or even criticize it, right? But why don't more people come out with these kind of arguments and say, you know, it's a given that that's wrong, but why is it not a given that, you know, these are all the other explanations that work?
So where do I begin with why this is not happening as much as it needs to? Let's start with your word, moderates. Moderates in Islam today are not very moderate at all. Okay? They display all the hallmarks of orthodoxy, including dogma and fear. And what are they afraid of? Moderate Muslims are afraid of busting out of groupthink because their entire identity is immersed in approval of others, particularly their own community. Now, I will tell you that this is not the first time that a religion has experienced such a problem. During the 1960s, when Martin Luther King Jr. was, you know, launching the civil rights movement, self-described moderate Christians accused him of creating conflict, generating tension, for calling out the interpretation of the Bible that propped up racism. And he pointed out, excuse me, folks, but in times of moral crisis, moderation is an excuse to do nothing. And the fact is, that's what's happening within Islam today, that so-called moderate Muslims are not only useless, worse, their silence is feeding the reactionaries, okay? So what I'm arguing in Allah, Liberty, and Love is that if you truly want to show non-Muslims that Islam is a religion of grace and humility and love and ultimately peace, then you can't stand on the sidelines and complain only about US foreign policy and Israeli Zionism. You've also got to speak up. Look inside. As the Quran tells us, God does not change the condition of a people until they change what is inside themselves.
And that being said, do non-Muslims have a role to play?
Yes.
And can they? Because they're told they can't. It's an internal conflict.
Moderate Muslims love to tell non-Muslims that this is none of their business. Well, sorry, but violence around the world, because we are interdependent as human beings, violence in anybody's name, including Allah's name, invariably affects non-Muslims as well, okay? So historical, you know, religious reform movements have shown that while positive change must be led from within the faith, they only reach the tipping point of change when wider society also supports it.
That is brilliant. Allah, Freedom and Love is your new book, also available in Bahasa Malaysia. Allah, Kebebasan dan Cinta by ZI Publications. Thank you so much for joining us on the Fairly Current Show.
Nice job, my friend.
Thank you.
Nice job, hosting.
For the first time?
For the first time?
Yeah.
Not the last time.